The workshop smelled of oil and metal. Dae-hyun sat at his desk, staring at the broken engine parts scattered in front of him. His hands were covered in grease, and his back hurt from working all day. The station was quiet. It was always quiet now. Station Gamma. 7 used to be full of people. 47 humans worked here 3 years ago. They fixed ships, managed trade routes, and helped travelers from all over the galaxy. But the war changed everything. The Vraken attacked without warning, destroying colonies and stations across human space. Most of the crew evacuated. Some died. Now, Dae-hyun was the only human left. He looked at the hologram message on his desk. The Galactic Transit Authority sent it this morning. The station would close in 6 months. They didn't need it anymore. Trade routes had shifted. Fewer ships came through the sector. Dae-hyun would have to find somewhere else to go. But where? He had no home, no family, nothing waiting for him anywhere in the galaxy. His wife Ji-woo died when the Vraken destroyed the moon colony. She was a doctor there, helping injured miners. The attack came so fast that nobody could escape. Dae-hyun got the message 3 days later. Just a simple notification that she was gone. His daughter Hannah was only 12 when the war started. The government evacuated all children to the inner systems, to places they said were safe. Hannah's transport ship left Earth with 500 other kids. It never arrived. Nobody knew what happened. Some people said the Vraken intercepted it. Others said it was mechanical failure. Dae-hyun searched for answers for months, but space was too big and the war too chaotic. Eventually, he stopped looking. He couldn't handle the hope anymore. The hope that maybe she survived somewhere. The hope that crushed him every time it turned out to be nothing. Now he was 42 years old, living alone on a dying station, fixing ships for aliens who barely looked at him. The Torvin traders were polite but distant. The crystalline Ashara paid well but never spoke. The insectoid Kraliks clicked their mandibles in what might have been respect, but they didn't stay long. Nobody stayed. They got their repairs and left. Dae-hyun ate dinner alone every night in the empty cafeteria. He slept in quarters meant for 4 people. He worked in a workshop built for a team of 20. Sometimes he wondered why he stayed, why he didn't just leave when everyone else did. But the truth was simple and sad. He had nowhere else to go. At least here, he had a purpose. Ships needed fixing. Life support systems needed maintenance. He was good at his job. Maybe that was enough. A sharp beep interrupted his thoughts. Dae-hyun looked at the scanner on his wall. Something was approaching the station. He frowned and pulled up the details. An unregistered pod, moving fast but erratically. The trajectory was wrong. The pod was tumbling, its engines firing randomly like something inside was broken. He checked the life signs. Faint, very faint, and the energy signature made his breath catch. Draconian. He had only met one Draconian in his entire life, a massive creature with red scales who looked at humans like they were insects. The merchant captain had needed emergency repairs, but refused to pay after Dae-hyun fixed his ship. Draconians were proud and ancient. They didn't like other species very much. But life was life. Dae-hyun learned that during the war. It didn't matter if someone was human, alien, friendly, or rude. If they needed help, you helped them. That's what separated people from monsters. He grabbed his emergency repair kit and headed to the docking bay. The station's computer tracked the pod's approach. It was coming in too fast. Dae-hyun activated the emergency protocols, tried to slow it down with tractor beams. The pod fought against the pull, spinning wildly. Then it crashed into the outer ring with a horrible screeching sound. Metal scraped against metal. Sparks flew in the vacuum of space. Finally, the magnetic clamps locked on and held the pod in place. Dae-hyun put on his spacesuit and cycled through the airlock. The pod looked bad. Scorch marks covered the hull. The door was blown outward from the inside, hanging at an angle. He approached carefully, checking for radiation or chemical leaks. Nothing dangerous, just a lot of damage. Inside the pod, Dae-hyun found a body, a Draconian, even bigger than the merchant captain he remembered. This one had dark blue scales that faded to silver at the edges. Female, he thought, based on the facial structure. She was slumped against the wall, clearly dead. Her eyes were closed, and her claws still gripped a control panel that had been ripped from the wall. But that wasn't what made Dae-hyun's heart race. In the corner of the pod, surrounded by a flickering blue energy field, sat an egg, a draconian egg, about as big as his torso. Its shell was covered in scales that shimmered between deep purple and midnight blue, and it was moving. The egg rocked slightly, and Dae-hyun could see cracks spreading across its surface. The stasis field around the egg was failing. Red lights blinked on the small device generating the field. Dae-hyun didn't know much about draconian biology, but he knew that eggs needed specific conditions to hatch safely. If the stasis field failed completely, the hatchling inside might die. He didn't think about the consequences. Didn't think about what the draconian government might do if they found out a human took one of their eggs. He just acted. Dae-hyun deactivated the failing stasis field and carefully lifted the egg. It was warm, almost hot, and he could feel something moving inside. Strong movements, like whatever was in there wanted out desperately. He carried the egg back through the airlock, moving as quickly as he dared. The egg was heavy and awkward, but he managed to get it to his workshop. He cleared a space on his padded workbench, the one he used for delicate electronics, and set the egg down gently. The cracks were spreading faster now. A small claw pushed through the shell, then another. Dae-hyun watched, fascinated and terrified. What was he supposed to do when it hatched? He didn't know how to take care of a draconian baby. He barely knew anything about their species. The shell broke apart in larger pieces. A small snout emerged, covered in wet scales. Then a head, with two small horns and bright golden eyes that opened and fixed directly on Dae-hyun's face. The hatchling chirped, a sound somewhere between a bird and a purring cat. It was small, maybe the size of a house cat, with wings that looked too delicate to fly. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. The hatchling's eyes were incredibly intelligent, not like an animal, more like a person. It tilted its head, studying him, and Dae-hyun felt something strange in his mind. A warmth, a presence that wasn't his own thoughts, but somehow felt connected to him. The hatchling chirped again, louder this time, and tried to climb out of the broken shell. It stumbled, its legs not quite steady yet, and Dae-hyun instinctively reached out to catch it. The moment his hands touched the small dragon, the warmth in his mind grew stronger. He could feel emotions that weren't his. Curiosity, confusion, and overwhelming trust. The hatchling settled in his hands, wrapping its tail around his wrist. It looked up at him with those golden eyes and made a soft, trilling sound. And somehow, impossibly, Dae-hyun knew what it meant. The little dragon was saying hello. It was saying it felt safe. It was saying he was important. For the first time in 3 years, Dae-hyun felt tears on his face. Good tears, not the ones he cried alone in his quarters. He looked at the small creature in his hands, this impossible thing that needed him, and whispered words he thought he would never say again. "Hey there, little one. You're safe now. I've got you." The dragon chirped happily and closed its eyes, completely content in his hands. And Dae-hyun realized that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't alone anymore. Dae-hyun spent the next 6 hours reading everything he could find about draconians. The station's database didn't have much information. Most of what he found was basic stuff. Draconians were an ancient species. They lived for hundreds of years. They were powerful warriors. But nothing about their babies. Nothing about how to take care of a hatchling. The little dragon stayed close to him the whole time. It tried to climb his leg, chirping softly. When Dae-hyun sat down, it curled up on his lap. When he stood up, it followed him around the workshop. The dragon's eyes never left his face. It was like the creature thought Dae-hyun was the most important thing in the universe. Finally, Dae-hyun found something useful buried in an old research file. Draconian hatchlings imprinted on the first being they saw after hatching. They formed a bond that lasted their entire life. A psychic connection that shared emotions and thoughts. The file said this bond could never be broken without killing the hatchling. Dae-hyun looked down at the small dragon on his lap. It looked back up at him with those bright golden eyes and made a happy trilling sound. His chest felt tight. This wasn't just a baby animal that needed care. This was a living being that now considered him family. Forever. "What am I going to do with you?" he asked softly. The dragon tilted its head, like it was trying to understand his words. Then it climbed up his chest and pressed its small head against his chin. The warmth in Daehyun's mind grew stronger. He could feel what the dragon felt. Safety, happiness, love, simple, pure emotions that made his eyes burn with tears. He decided to name the dragon Bile. It meant star in Korean. His daughter Hannah used to love looking at stars through the station windows. She would point at different constellations and make up stories about them. Daehyun hadn't thought about those memories in a long time. They hurt too much. But now, with this small creature depending on him, the memories felt different. Still sad, but also warm. Bile seemed to like the name. The dragon chirped and nuzzled against him. Over the next few days, Daehyun learned how to care for his unexpected companion. Bile ate a lot. The dragon loved the processed protein bars from Daehyun's emergency supplies. It also liked the synthetic chicken he kept in his quarters. Bile would sit on the table and chirp until Daehyun shared his food. The hatchling grew fast. Incredibly fast. After just 1 week, Bile was the size of a medium dog. The dragon's wings developed quickly, and it started practicing flying around the workshop. At first, Bile could only glide short distances. But soon the dragon was soaring from one end of the room to the other, clearly enjoying the freedom. What surprised Daehyun most was how smart Bile was. The dragon watched everything he did and started copying his movements. When Daehyun picked up a wrench, Bile tried to grab one too with its small claws. When he worked on repairs, the dragon sat beside him and studied the tools like it was learning. One day, Daehyun was fixing a Torvin ship's engine. He needed to hold a plasma torch steady while he welded 2 pieces together. Bile suddenly grabbed the torch with its claws and held it perfectly still. The dragon's grip was steady and precise. Daehyun stared in amazement. "You understand what I'm doing, don't you?" he asked. Bile made a sound that was definitely a laugh. The dragon kept holding the torch steady until Daehyun finished the repair. After that, Bile helped him with every job. The dragon became his assistant, learning faster than any apprentice Daehyun ever trained. The bond between them deepened every day. Daehyun found himself talking to Bile about everything. He told the dragon about his wife Ji-woo and how she used to laugh at his terrible jokes. He talked about his daughter Hannah and the way she would dance around their apartment on Earth. He shared his loneliness, his grief, his frustration with the bureaucrats who wanted to close the station. And somehow Bile understood. The dragon couldn't speak, but Daehyun felt its emotions through their connection. Sympathy when he felt sad, comfort when he missed his family, joy when he smiled. The presence in his mind became constant, like a gentle warmth that reminded him he wasn't alone anymore. 2 weeks after Bile hatched, everything changed. Daehyun was working in his workshop when the station's alarms went off. A ship was approaching, a big ship. His scanner showed a Draconian warship dropping out of faster-than-light travel. It was smaller than the massive military vessels he'd seen in news reports, but still impressive. The hull was decorated with glowing symbols that looked ancient and powerful. Daehyun's heart raced. They were coming for Bile. He knew it. The Draconians must have tracked the escape pod. They were coming to take the dragon away. Bile sensed his fear through their bond. The dragon, now the size of a large dog, pressed against his leg. Through their connection, Daehyun felt Bile's determination. The dragon wasn't scared. It was ready to fight if necessary. A communication request came through. Daehyun accepted it with shaking hands. A hologram appeared in his workshop. The Draconian was female with crimson scales that faded to gold at the edges. She was beautiful in a terrifying way. Her eyes were ancient and sharp, like she could see through walls and read minds. "Human," she said. Her voice was deep and commanding. "I am Commandant Hygiene of the Draconian Fleet. Our sensors detected the remains of a transport pod at your station. The vessel belonged to my sister and carried precious cargo. I will board your station in 1 hour to investigate." The hologram disappeared before Daehyun could respond. He stood frozen for a moment, his mind racing. What should he do? Hide, Bile? That was impossible. The dragon was too big now, and the Draconians could probably sense their own kind. Run? There was nowhere to go. The station had only small maintenance pods, nothing that could outrun a warship. He looked down at Bile. The dragon looked back at him with those intelligent golden eyes. Through their bond, Daehyun felt emotions that surprised him. Bile wasn't afraid. The dragon was determined and protective. And then Daehyun felt something else. Something that felt like words, even though Bile couldn't speak yet. Stay together. You are mine, my favorite human. The thought was so clear in his mind that Daehyun gasped. Bile could communicate with him now. Not just emotions, but actual ideas. The bond had grown that strong. Tears filled Daehyun's eyes. He knelt down and wrapped his arms around the dragon's neck. Yeah, he whispered, his voice ruffled emotion. You're my favorite dragon, too. And I'm not letting anyone take you away from me. I don't care who they are or what laws I'm breaking. You're mine to protect now. Bile made a deep rumbling sound that vibrated through Daehyun's chest. It felt like a purr, but stronger. The dragon's tail wrapped around him, and through their bond he felt absolute trust. Bile believed in him completely, believed that together they could face anything. Daehyun spent the next hour preparing. He cleaned up the workshop, making it look professional. He gathered all the information he had about the escape pod and the dead Draconian inside. He prepared himself mentally for whatever was about to happen. If the Commandant tried to take Bile by force, he would fight. He didn't have weapons or powers, but he had something stronger. He had purpose again. He had someone who needed him, and he'd already lost everyone he loved once. He wasn't going through that again. When the hour was almost up, Daehyun stood at the entrance to his workshop with Bile at his side. The dragon sat tall and proud, wings folded against its back. Through their bond, Daehyun felt Bile's courage flowing into him, strengthening his resolve. Whatever happens, Daehyun said quietly, we face it together. Bile chirped in agreement, and they waited for the Commandant to arrive. The docking bay doors opened with a hiss. Commandant Hygiene walked through like she owned the entire station. She was even bigger than Daehyun expected, nearly 8 feet tall, with crimson scales that gleamed under the lights. 4 armed guards followed her, each one carrying weapons that looked advanced and deadly. Their armor was black with red markings, and their faces were hidden behind helmets. Daehyun stood his ground at the entrance to his workshop. His legs wanted to shake, but he forced them to stay still. Bile pressed against his side, partially hidden behind his legs, but visible enough that hiding would be pointless. The dragon was tense, ready to act if needed. Hygiene stopped 3 meters away. Her golden eyes locked onto Bile first. For a long moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The silence felt heavy, like the air before a storm. Then something changed in Hygiene's expression. Her fierce warrior face softened in a way that made her look almost gentle. So the egg survived, she said quietly. Her voice was different now, not commanding but sad. My sister would be pleased. Daehyun swallowed hard. Your sister died protecting it. The pod was badly damaged when it reached the station. I did what I could to save the hatchling. Hygiene's gaze shifted to him. She studied him like he was a puzzle she needed to solve. Her eyes moved over his greasy work clothes, his calloused hands, his tired face. Daehyun felt like she was looking into his soul, seeing everything he tried to hide. You hatched the egg, she said. It wasn't a question. You formed the bond. Daehyun nodded. I didn't know what else to do. The stasis field was failing. The hatchling was dying. I couldn't just let that happen. Do you understand what you have done, human? Hygiene took a step closer, her guards tense, hands moving toward their weapons. The imprinting bond between the Draconian and their chosen guardian is sacred. It cannot be broken without killing the hatchling. My sister's child has chosen you as its family. Before Daehyun could respond, Bile moved. The dragon stepped forward, positioning itself between him and the Commandant. Despite being so much smaller than the adult Draconians, Bile spread its wings wide and growled. The sound was surprisingly deep and threatening for such a young creature. One of the guards raised his weapon. Daehyun's heart jumped into his throat, but Hygiene held up her hand. Stand down, she ordered. Her voice was sharp, leaving no room for argument. The guard lowered his weapon immediately. Hygiene looked at Bile with something that might have been pride. Already so protective. You have our family spirit, little one. She knelt down, bringing herself closer to Bile's level. The movement was slow and careful, non-threatening. Then she spoke in a language Daehyun had never heard before. It was musical, full of clicks and deep rumbling sounds that seemed to vibrate in his chest. The words felt ancient and important. Bile responded in the same language. The dragon's voice was higher, more uncertain, but the sounds were similar. They were talking, actually communicating in ways Daehyun couldn't understand with his ears. But through the bond, he felt Bile's emotions. Sadness for never knowing its mother. Confusion about what should happen next. But also fierce determination not to leave Daehyun. The conversation lasted several minutes. Daehyun watched, feeling useless and scared. What were they saying? Was Hygiene convincing Bile to leave? Could she break the bond somehow? Through their connection, he tried to send Bile his own feelings. Love, protectiveness, the desperate need not to be alone again. Finally, Hygiene stood up. Her expression was complicated, mixing several emotions Daehyun couldn't read. She looked at him with those ancient eyes. The hatchling says its name is Bile, given by you. It says you are its favorite human, its chosen guardian, and that it will not leave you. She paused, and something flickered across her face. Pain, maybe, or understanding. It also says you are sad and lonely, that you have lost your own hatchlings, that you need family as much as it does. Daehyun's throat tightened. He couldn't speak. How did Bile know all that? He hadn't told the dragon everything, not in words. The bond shares everything, Hygiene explained, as if reading his thoughts. Emotions, memories, truth. You cannot hide from each other. That is why the imprinting is sacred. It creates perfect understanding between two souls. She was quiet for a moment, looking at something far away. My sister's name was Soon-hee. She was a scout, investigating report of enemy activity in this sector when her ship was ambushed. She fought them off long enough to send the egg ahead in an emergency pod, hoping it would reach safety. Hygiene's voice grew rough. That the egg found you, that her child chose someone who understands loss and still chooses to protect. She would call that fate. Daehyun found his voice. It came out stronger than he expected. I won't let anyone take Bile from me. I don't care about diplomatic consequences or ancient traditions. That dragon is mine to protect now. The guards shifted nervously. One of them muttered something in Draconian that sounded like a warning, but Hygiene's expression changed. Her eyes narrowed, but not with anger, with something else. Respect, maybe. Bold words for a human with no weapons facing a Draconian military commandant, and for armed guards, she said. I've already lost everyone I loved once, Daehyun replied, his hands clenched into fists. I'm not going through that again. You'll have to kill me first. The workshop fell silent. Daehyun's heart pounded so hard he could hear it in his ears. Through the bond, he felt Bile's fierce pride and love. The dragon moved closer to him, pressing against his leg in solidarity. Then, incredibly, Hygiene smiled. It was a fierce expression, showing sharp teeth, but it seemed genuine. Good. Soon he would have liked you. She always said humans had more fire in them than most species gave them credit for. She gestured to her guards. They looked confused, but lowered their weapons completely. Hygiene turned her full attention back to Daehyun. I cannot take the hatchling from its chosen guardian. Our laws forbid it. The bond is sacred, and breaking it will be murder. But I also cannot leave my sister's child with a human mechanic on a dying station with no resources and no protection. She crossed her arms. So I offer you a choice, Daehyun of Earth. Daehyun blinked. He hadn't told her his name, but the bond. Of course. Bile knew his name, so now Hygiene knew it too. You can stay here, Hygiene continued. I will ensure the station receives enough funding to operate indefinitely. You will have supplies, protection, and the freedom to raise Bile as you see fit. The station will become neutral territory under Draconian protection. You will be safe. It sounded good. Almost too good. Daehyun waited for the other option. Or, Hygiene said, and her voice grew softer, you can come with me. Join my crew as a civilian contractor. Your skills will be valuable. We always need good mechanics who understand multiple species technologies. Bio will need proper instruction in draconian culture and combat techniques as it grows. You would have a home, a purpose, and a family. She paused. If you can accept that family includes creatures like us. Daehyun looked down at Bio. The dragon gazed back up at him with those bright golden eyes. Through their bond, he felt Bio's emotions clearly. Hope, trust, the absolute certainty that whatever Daehyun chose would be the right decision. He thought about staying on the station. Safe, protected, but still alone except for Bio. He thought about the empty cafeteria, the quiet corridors, the years of isolation. Then he thought about having a crew again, working with others, having a purpose beyond just surviving each day. Most importantly, he thought about Bio. The dragon would grow large and powerful. It would need training, culture, understanding of its own species. Daehyun couldn't provide that alone. He could give Bio love and protection, but not the knowledge of what it meant to be draconian. When do we leave? Daehyun asked. Bio chirped happily and jumped up, trying to lick his face. Through the bond, Daehyun felt the dragon's pure joy. Hygiene's smile grew wider. Tomorrow morning, pack what matters. Leave the rest. Welcome to the Crimson Dawn mechanic. Welcome to the family. The Crimson Dawn was nothing like Daehyun expected. The corridors were huge, almost 3 times wider than normal ship hallways. Everything was decorated with crystals that glowed with soft blue and purple light. The walls had patterns carved into them, symbols that looked ancient and beautiful. The air smelled different too, like ozone and something sweet he couldn't identify. Hygiene led them through the ship personally. Daehyun carried a small bag of belongings while Bio walked beside him, looking at everything with wide, curious eyes. The dragon had grown again overnight. Now Bio was almost as big as Daehyun's waist, with wings that could almost lift the dragon off the ground during practice flights. Other crew members stopped to watch them pass. Most were draconians of different colors. Some had blue scales, others green or bronze. They all stared at Daehyun with expressions ranging from curiosity to suspicion. A human on a draconian warship was clearly unusual, but when they saw Bio walking confidently beside him, their expressions changed to something like understanding. Here are your quarters, Hygiene said, opening a door. The room inside was massive. The ceiling was at least 15 feet high, and the space was bigger than Daehyun's entire workshop back on the station. There was a sleeping platform that looked like it could adjust to human size. Against one wall stood a dedicated area for Bio with heating elements, cushioned platforms at different heights, and enough space for a dragon 3 times Bio's current size. Hatchlings need warmth and vertical space, Hygiene explained. Bio will grow rapidly over the next few months. By the end of this year, the dragon will be large enough to carry you in flight. Daehyun watched Bio explore the new space with obvious joy. The dragon jumped from platform to platform, testing each one. How big will Bio get? An adult draconian can reach 20 meters in length with a wingspan of 40 meters, Hygiene said. She seemed amused by his shocked expression. We are long-lived. I am 347 years old. Bio will be considered young for the next 30 years. The reality hit Daehyun hard, so I'll die while Bio is still young. Hygiene's expression became gentle. Yes, you will age and pass while Bio is still learning about life. But the bond does not end with death. Bio will carry your memory, your emotions, your very essence for its entire life. You will live on through the dragon. That is why we choose guardians carefully, why the imprinting bond is sacred. It was a sad thought, but also strangely comforting. Even after he died, some part of him would continue through Bio. His daughter Hannah would have liked that idea. She always said love was the only thing that lasted forever. Over the following weeks, Daehyun settled into his new life. The work was challenging but satisfying. Draconian technology was incredibly advanced but also temperamental. The engines ran on principles Daehyun barely understood, something about folding space and channeling energy from stars. But his experience with hundreds of different alien systems helped him figure things out. He met the chief engineer, a blue-scale draconian named Subin. She was grumpy and didn't like humans much at first, but after Dae-hyun fixed a power converter that had been broken for weeks, she grudgingly admitted he was useful. "Your methods are strange," Subin said, watching him work. "You do not follow proper protocols. But somehow, things work when you fix them." Dae-hyun smiled. Sometimes the best solution isn't in the manual. The navigator, Taeyong, was friendlier. He had green scales and was curious about human culture. He taught Dae-hyun basic draconian phrases and asked endless questions about Earth. What did humans eat? How did they celebrate? What were their families like? Dae-hyun found himself talking about things he hadn't discussed in years. There was also Jaewon, a young draconian who was only 50 years old. In draconian terms, that made him practically a teenager. Jaewon was fascinated by human music and movies. He would visit Dae-hyun's quarters and ask to watch old Earth films that Dae-hyun had on his datapad. But the most important relationship Dae-hyun developed was still with Bile. The dragon was learning at an incredible rate. Within 3 weeks, Bile mastered flight completely. The dragon would soar through the ship's large cargo bay, doing loops and dives that made Dae-hyun's heart race with worry and pride. More importantly, Bile began communicating in broken draconian. Simple words at first. Hungry, happy, fly, love. But the dragon's vocabulary grew every day. And through their bond, they could share complex thoughts now, not just emotions. One evening, Dae-hyun sat in his quarters repairing a damaged sensor. Bile, now the size of a horse, settled beside him. The dragon's presence in his mind had become so natural that Dae-hyun barely noticed it anymore. It was like breathing, constant and necessary. Then Bile projected a thought that was perfectly clear. "Why you still feel sad, favorite human?" Dae-hyun's hand stopped moving. He didn't realize the grief was still so visible through their bond. "I lost my family," he said quietly. "My wife and daughter. Sometimes I feel guilty for being happy again." Bile's large head moved closer, golden eyes staring into his. The dragon's thought came through with absolute certainty. They would want you to be happy. You have a new family now. Me, and Hygiene. The crew. We need you. Tears filled Dae-hyun's eyes. "I need you too, Bile. More than you know." The dragon's response was simple but powerful. "I know. I feel it every day. You are my favorite human. The only human I need. And I am your dragon. Forever." That word hung in Dae-hyun's mind. Forever. It was a promise bigger than both of them. A bond that would last beyond his lifetime. Carried forward by Bile long after Dae-hyun was gone. It should have been sad, but instead it felt right. Like he was part of something eternal. The peaceful routine lasted 2 months. Then everything changed. Dae-hyun was in the engine room with Subin when alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Red lights flashed. The intercom crackled to life with Hygiene's voice, urgent and commanding. "All crew to battle stations. We have received a distress signal from a human colony. They are under attack by Vraken raiders. We are moving to intercept." Dae-hyun's blood went cold. The Vraken, the same species that destroyed his wife's colony, that killed his daughter. His hands clenched into fists. Subin looked at him with something like sympathy. "You should go to your quarters. Stay safe during the battle." But Dae-hyun shook his head. "No, I can help. I know these systems. You'll need every skilled person working if we're going into combat." "It is not your fight, human," Subin said, but her tone was uncertain. "Yes, it is," Dae-hyun replied firmly. "Those are my people down there. And the Vraken took everything from me once. I won't let them do it again." Through his bond, he felt Bile's fierce agreement. The dragon was in the cargo bay, but sent a clear message. "I will protect you, and you will help save your people." Together, minutes later, Dae-hyun stood in the briefing room with the senior crew. Hygiene outlined the situation quickly. A human colony called Haven was under attack. The Vraken fleet had 12 ships surrounding the planet. The Crimson Dawn was outnumbered, but Draconian warships were powerful. "We will engage and provide cover for evacuation ships," Hygiene announced. "This will be dangerous. The Vraken outnumber us 3-1. One of the officers frowned. "Why risk our ship for a human colony? We have no strategic interest there." Hygiene's eyes flashed with anger. But before she could respond, Bile walked into the briefing room. The dragon had grown bold enough to go anywhere on the ship now. Bile moved to Daehyun's side and sat tall, wings spread slightly in a protective stance. Hygiene's expression softened. She looked at Bile, then at Daehyun, and finally back at her crew. "Because one of our crew has a personal interest. Because the humans of that colony are no different from a human who saved my sister's child. And because the Vraken took enough from this sector during the war." Her voice grew hard as steel. "Today we take something back." The crew murmured agreement. Daehyun felt gratitude wash over him. They were doing this for him, for his people, because he was part of their family now. As the ship moved toward battle, Bile looked up at Daehyun with determination burning in those golden eyes. "Together," the dragon projected, "we face this together." Daehyun rested his hand on Bile's scaled neck. "Together," he agreed, and prepared himself for the fight ahead. The Vraken fleet looked like a swarm of angry insects. Their ships were dark and angular, covered in spikes and weapon ports. They surrounded Haven Colony like predators circling wounded prey. Below them, on the planet's surface, Daehyun could see explosions, buildings burning, people dying. His people. The Crimson Dawn dropped out of faster-than-light travel with a flash of blue light. Immediately, alarms screamed throughout the ship. Red lights pulsed in every corridor. Hygiene's voice came through the intercom, calm despite the chaos. "All personnel to battle stations. Engineering, I need maximum power to shields and weapons. Daehyun, get to the auxiliary reactor room. We need every bit of energy you can give us." Daehyun ran through the corridors with Bile racing beside him. The dragon was now big enough that its wings scraped the ceiling, but Bile moved with perfect grace. They reached the reactor room just as the first Vraken weapons hit the Crimson Dawn shields. The entire ship shuddered violently. Daehyun grabbed a support beam to keep from falling. "Okay," he muttered, pulling up the diagnostic panel. "Let's see what we can do." The Draconian power systems were efficient, but had safety limits built in, limits designed to prevent overloading. But Daehyun had learned during his years as a mechanic that sometimes you had to break the rules to survive. His fingers moved across the controls quickly. He bypassed 3 safety protocols and rerouted power from non-essential systems like crew quarters and the galley. Through his bond with Bile, he could sense the battle happening outside. The dragon was connected to the ship in ways Daehyun didn't fully understand. Some kind of psychic link that all Draconians share with their vessels. He felt each impact, each near miss, each moment of danger. "Subin," Daehyun spoke into his communicator. "I'm giving you a 20% boost to the weapons, but it's going to run hot. You have maybe 10 minutes before the system overheats." Subin's reply came through with barely contained excitement. 10 minutes is plenty. Good work, human." Outside the ship, the Crimson Dawn unleashed hell. Plasma cannons fired in rapid succession, bright blue beams that cut through space. One Vraken ship exploded in a brilliant flash. Another 2 broke formation, their hulls cracked and leaking atmosphere. But there were still too many. The Vraken adapted quickly, adjusting their tactics. More ships moved to surround the Crimson Dawn. Then Daehyun felt something through his bond with Bile, a surge of power and determination. He looked at the dragon. Bile's eyes were glowing bright gold, and the scales shimmered with internal light. "I can help," Bile projected clearly. The dragon's mental voice was stronger now, more confident. "Let me fly." "No," Daehyun said immediately. "You're too young. Those ships will kill you." "I am strong enough," Bile insisted. There was no fear in the dragon's thoughts, only fierce certainty. "My kind were born for this. Trust me, favorite human." Before Daehyun could argue more, Bile turned and ran toward the flight deck. Through their bond, Daehyun experienced everything. The rush of the airlock opening, The sudden cold of space that didn't hurt Draconians the way it hurt other species. Then the incredible sensation of Bile's wings catching the solar wind. The dragon soared between the battling ships, impossibly fast and agile. Dae-hyun watched through the reactor room's small viewport, his heart in his throat. Bile was so small compared to the warships. One good hit would kill the dragon instantly, but Bile was fast, faster than the Vraken could track. The dragon dove and weaved through weapons fire like dancing. Then Dae-hyun saw something that made him gasp. Bile opened its mouth and released a stream of fire. Not regular fire. Plasma fire, white-hot and devastating. The flames cut through a Vraken ship's hull like it was paper. Other Draconians launched from the crimson dawn. Adult warriors with scales of every color. They were huge, each one the size of a small building with wings that blocked out stars. They flew in formation with Bile, accepting the young dragon as one of their own. Together, they became a force of nature. Claws tore through metal. Fire melted weapons. Ancient fury made real. Hygiene's voice came through the ship-wide channel. For the first time, Dae-hyun heard real emotion in her tone. Pride, joy, grief, all ships. Follow Suni's child. Today we honor the fallen by protecting the living. The battle turned. The Vraken hadn't expected dragons. Most species relied on ships and weapons. They forgot that Draconians were weapons themselves. The enemy fleet scattered, breaking formation. Some tried to fight. Those ships died quickly. Others ran, jumping to faster-than-light travel in panic. Within 20 minutes, the sky above Haven Colony was clear. The Vraken were gone, either destroyed or fled. Dae-hyun collapsed against the reactor console, his whole body shaking. His mind was still connected to Bile, still experiencing the dragon's perspective, the rush of victory, the satisfaction of protecting the weak, the pure joy of flight and fire and family fighting together. Bile returned to the ship, landing on the flight deck with surprising grace. When they reunited in the corridor, Dae-hyun didn't care that the dragon scales were still hot from atmospheric reentry. He wrapped his arms around Bile's neck and held on tight. "You were incredible," he whispered. "Terrifying, but incredible. I am my mother's child," Bile projected with pride. "And I am your dragon. That makes me strong." The crew celebrated as they coordinated with Haven Colony's defense forces. Dae-hyun learned that over 6,000 humans had been evacuated safely. Casualties were minimal thanks to the Crimson Dawn's intervention. Messages of gratitude flooded in from the colony's leaders. But the words felt distant to Dae-hyun. He hadn't done this for glory or thanks. He did it for Bile, for his new family, for the chance to finally fight back against the monsters that took everything from him. That evening, Hygiene called Dae-hyun to her private quarters. The commandant looked tired but satisfied. She poured 2 glasses of something that glowed faint blue. "Draconian celebration wine," she explained. "Made from stellar algae. It won't hurt you. You earned it today." Dae-hyun took the glass. "Thank you for everything, for giving me a home, for fighting for my people, for accepting me." Hygiene held up her hand, stopping him. "You don't need to thank me. You saved my sister's child when you could have walked away, when helping would only bring you trouble. You gave Bile a future. You gave our family hope." She raised her glass. "To Suni, who trusted the universe would provide. To Bile, who chose a guardian with courage. And to you, Dae-hyun of Earth, mechanic, guardian, and now honorary member of our clan. May your years with Bile be filled with joy and purpose." Dae-hyun touched his glass to hers. "To family," he said softly. "The one we lose and the one we find." The wine was sweet and warm, filling him with a pleasant heat. They talked for a while about the battle, about Bile's incredible performance, about the future. Hygiene told him that other colonies had already sent requests for the Crimson Dawn to patrol their sectors. Word spread fast about the Draconian ship that protected humans. "You have given us a new purpose," Hygiene said. "We were warriors without a war, wandering without direction. Now we protect those who cannot protect themselves. It is a good purpose, an honorable one." Later, Dae-hyun returned to his quarters. Bile was already there, curled up on the sleeping platform, even though the dragon was now too big to fit comfortably. Daehyun laid down beside the dragon, resting his hand on the warm scales. "You are my favorite human," Bile murmured sleepily through their bond. "Always. And you're my favorite dragon," Daehyun whispered back. "Always and forever." He closed his eyes and felt the dragon's presence in his mind, that constant warmth that reminded him he wasn't alone. He thought about everything that changed in just 3 months. He went from a lonely man on a dying station to someone who mattered, someone with family, someone with purpose. Outside the viewport, stars glittered like promises. Somewhere out, there were more colonies that needed protection, more people who needed help, more adventures waiting. And Daehyun would face them all with Bile at his side. He had lost his first family to war and tragedy, but the universe, in its strange way, gave him a second chance. A dragon hatchling who chose him, a crew who accepted him, a commandant who honored him, a home among the stars. For the first time in 3 years, Daehyun fell asleep without nightmares. Instead, he dreamed of flying, of soaring through space on Bile's back, the dragon fully grown and magnificent, of protecting those who couldn't protect themselves, of a future filled with purpose and love. The bond between them pulsed gently in his mind, a reminder that he was never truly alone. Not anymore. Not ever again.